Well, Disney bought Fox, which means Marvel has pretty much all of the Marvel characters from the comics under their belt now, or at least once the sale goes through, and I thought I would kind of talk about how I think they should integrate the Fantastic Four as well as the X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or what they should do with the characters in general. I guess I'll start off with Deadpool. When it comes to Deadpool, I think they can pretty much keep him as he was, and I'm assuming that's what the plan is. There's no point in recasting Ryan Reynolds or anything like that, and with it being such a hit and a relatively cheap film to produce, at least the first one, I don't know how low the budgets are going to continue to stay. It would be relatively easy just to basically have Deadpool make a couple jokes and say, well, I'm in the MCU now. And that would pretty much be all you needed for him to basically transition over into the MCU. I don't think they could just broadcast it, toss it out there as it is. I think they probably have to use a new banner. But perhaps I would assume that other than maybe a small cameo in like one of the next big Avengers crossover movies, Deadpool would pretty well be self-contained, maybe crossover with a little bit of the X-Men things. So Deadpool wouldn't need all that much work relatively. I think it would be pretty stupid of them to try to recast or really change what they're doing when they could kind of just continue on the momentum of that, make these films for $500 million, which is a fraction of what, say, Thor Ragnarok made, and still make even $500 million or more. So there would be no point in changing that. Next off, let's talk about the ones that I think are more interesting than something like Deadpool, which will likely pretty much stay the same. Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four has been pretty well butchered in movies. Not for a lack of trying, I don't think. I think Josh Trank's movie would have been alright if it wasn't for studio interference, and it was kind of unique. It wasn't like many of the superhero films we got at the time, or even now. Most of the superhero films we're getting are kind of the same shit over and over again. So seeing kind of a sci-fi movie with horror elements, I think Josh Trank, especially with his previous films, actually had a pretty good chance to make a good movie. But when paired up with Fox, that didn't work. But anyways, off that tangent, how I think they should do them in the MCU, well, I'm assuming they're probably going to do them as a comedic four-way team. But the comedy's already kind of there on the wall. I don't think they should do a Guardians of the Galaxy type movie, even though that's totally what Marvel's going to do. I think Reed Richards should be played more straight. He should be the smart character, not really cracking jokes, but you already have the Thing and the Human Torch, who historically speaking were the comedic characters in that, and you could still kind of have that MCU comedy charm that all of the MCU movies try to have for better or worse results in the recent years. Sue Storm would be pretty easy to integrate as well. Obviously she'd be integrated with the Fantastic Four, but Sue Storm, I think they should do something like she's the mother type figure of the Fantastic Four, the voice of reason, because, you know, Ben and Johnny have their kind of sibling rivalry type of deal, even though, yes, they're not direct siblings, but they're kind of in-team rivalry. They're always joking around and messing around. Reed is very focused on science, and Sue Storm can play kind of the anchor of the Fantastic Four. I don't really know who they should use as the villain. I want to say Dr. Doom, and I know Dr. Doom's been played to death. The Fantastic Four has other villains, but it would be probably the best way to integrate him into the universe, and depending, I don't know how long Tom Hiddleston, who played Loki, really has left in the MCU. I feel like he's the main. Obviously, Thanos is like the ultimate villain of the MCU, the final boss up to the point they're in, which I think will likely transfer into Galactus. I don't know how the fuck they're gonna film that movie and make it work, because obviously, I guess at least they couldn't do it worse than Fox's attempts. That would be pretty fucking hard. But I think Doctor Doom could kind of take an important role. I mean, Doctor Doom is one of the villains that are a universal villain throughout. I mean, you got Green Goblin, but he's only fighting Spider-Man. You got Zemo, he's mostly fighting Captain America. Abomination's fighting Hulk. There's always those villains that only really work as the antagonist for one hero. Doctor Doom works pretty universal. I mean, Iron Man has had his things with him. He's actually Iron Man right now in the comics, or was last time I read. I don't fucking read Marvel comics anymore. All DC now, but I think Doctor Doom would be the one you want to introduce because he has potential in the franchise outside of just being a antagonist to the Fantastic Four. He could show up in a Captain America movie on a cameo sense, and perhaps he could team up with some other supervillains and have kind of an anti-Avengers thing going, as weird as that movie would probably be and as terrible as it would likely be. I am getting quite tired of these Marvel movies, but I can see Doctor Doom being able to really bring the MCU a villain that it desperately needs. I mean, the real only villain with a lasting impact thus far that we've seen on screen has been Loki. I mean, Red Skull got murked right away. Thor's villains have been shit, except Hela. She was alright, but she's not coming back ever, so Doctor Doom could be a pretty universal villain. I think one thing they do need to do is they need to get that guy in a slave's contract where they have him for like 15 fucking years and just keep him on pretty much a ton of movies, at least at a cameo respect. And I think it would be kind of cool introducing him and having him be like a reverse Nick Fury, where he shows up from time to time and he's like at the end of the credits and he's like, we're assembling an evil team, like what happened in Justice League, except probably just as cringy. But well, I mean, Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor wouldn't be in it. He might be able to do it cool, whatever. But I think Doctor Doom should be the villain, at least in some respect, or maybe establish Doctor Doom, maybe not have him be the main villain. It would be kind of cool seeing like Doctor Doom being part of the good guys for a good part of the movie and then switching sides. Obviously, that's kind of what they did in Josh Tranks. I mean, that's kind of the his origin, really. So that would work. But I think what if you almost had him in the Fantastic Four for like half the movie, and then he switches sides, he kind of takes over the main villain. I feel like it's kind of integral to have, with the Fantastic Four, introduce Doctor Doom, because the sooner you can get him in the universe, that'll add a new breath of fresh air into the MCU. Yeah, you could do someone like Mole Man, but no one's going to give a shit about Mole Man. He's going to be there and gone, villain of the week. Where if you establish Doctor Doom, there's more you can do with him in the future, and not just potential within the Fantastic Four. But I do hope we see a good Fantastic Four. I actually, I didn't completely hate the cast of Josh Trank's Fantastic Four. I have no fucking idea who I'd cast. I'd probably, if I had to take a gamut at who I think they should cast, I think it would be cool, especially with Human Torch and Spider-Man being good friends. I think if they kept Human Torch a little younger, around the age of Tom Holland, that way you could kind of have maybe Human Torch show up in Spider-Man Homecoming 3 or 4, although I know that rights, well, I guess no, if Marvel had the control of Human Torch, I was going to say the Fox, Sony, Marvel Studios rights, but I guess all the rights would kind of be in one basket there, because, Marvel's actually going to flat out own it, where they have kind of a producing role when it comes to Spider-Man. So I think that would actually be super cool. And like Spider-Man Homecoming, if they kind of started a friendship and we could see that develop through like the Avengers movies and stuff, I think that would be cool. So keep him younger. Maybe have the Thing be a little older. I mean, you do have to do the rocket into space thing, so it's kind of hard to cast him really young. But I mean, you could probably have Human Torch be like 25. The Thing be like, could be like 25, 32. Keep, maybe have Reed be like 10 years older than Johnny. Have Sue be like 5 years older than Johnny type deal. And I think that would work out good. Keep them in their 30s and under, because you also don't want a situation like Robert Downey Jr. where Robert Downey Jr. is coming up on 50 or is 50. I don't fucking know. But for the longevity of the Fantastic Four, you probably don't want to make them too young in this case. But yeah, I don't know how this movie would play out. I think it would be cool. Obviously, make it fun, make it accurate to the comics. But like I said, I wouldn't have everybody be comic relief, because I think the Marvel movies, like Thor Ragnarok was a good movie, but if all the Marvel movies become comedies or have a lot of comedy elements like Thor Ragnarok, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Ant-Man did, it's gonna get really fucking old really fucking fast, especially when there's only so many jokes I think you can do easily in a superhero movie, other than the situational gags, which I sometimes tend to seem forced, you know. But anyways, that was my thoughts for Fantastic Four. Next, X-Men I think is the more interesting one in my opinion. In the early 2000s, we've had an X-Men continuity, quote unquote, since the early 2000s. Obviously, after X3, the continuity got really fucked. I mean, not that it wasn't already kind of fucked before X3, but X-Men Origins Wolverine really fucked the continuity. X-Men First Class did nothing to help. Days of Future Past made it a fucking mess. And X-Men Apocalypse was completely fucking terrible, even though Days of Future Past and First Class I think are two of the best X-Men movies yet. I think for this one, go less edgy. Finally put the X-Men in the costumes. I mean, yeah, we have them in their kind of edgy jumpsuits, and some of them have kind of costumes. I thought First Class had good costumes, but I wouldn't mind just like Marvel Studios is not afraid to toss Captain America in the full costume, you know what I'm saying? So do that with the X-Men. I would love to see the first one kind of be similar in vein to First Class, where if you start out with such a massive team, you have kind of the awkward who's who. No one has much time to establish anything. We don't have enough time to establish an ensemble, so Wolverine's the main character. The X-Men entire series, basically, aside from X-Men Apocalypse and First Class, could have pretty much just been called Wolverine and the X-Men or something like that. I think this one, you don't put Wolverine in it. I think for this X-Men movie, I personally would like to see the original X-Men, the original 5 X-Men, Angel, Beast, Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Iceman. I think that would be pretty cool. Maybe add someone else in there, like Nightcrawler or somebody, use him as cannon fodder. Maybe not Nightcrawler, grab like one of the B X-Men, use him as cannon fodder, and then, you know, have the movie play out. Probably, you know, again, I'm gonna sound played out because this is what they did in the old franchise, but probably start with Magneto. I mean, X-Men's entire struggle basically comes down to Magneto. They might fight a villain of the week here and there, but 90% of the time the problem stems from Magneto. So I think, again, start out, base the movie with Magneto and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Maybe have Magneto also kind of starting his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. You know, you could have, I don't fucking know, Toad, Pyro, I'm just fucking naming people, Sabretooth. You could, you know, get an ensemble, have them go against Magneto. Obviously, in this case, I think recast everybody. And then as the series goes on, add more X-Men slowly. But I think if they go into an instant clusterfuck of 500 mutants, like, I personally don't need to see every fucking mutant on screen at once. I am fine with seeing just like 6 mutants. The next movie maybe have 9 or 10 mutants, maybe one of the mutants dies, you know. I don't need a million mutants on screen at once. And I think it would almost be better in the long run because, you know, if one of the actors quits, you can say they left the school, they died. That shit happens all the time in X-Men. X-Men is like the biggest fucking soap opera comic book, I think. So if you kind of have a revolving door, then it's like, okay, the girl who played Jean Grey is signed on for 3 movies or 3 movies up. She's not coming back for whatever reason. They'd probably pull her off of like Game of Thrones or a fucking what the fuck do you call it? CW show or some shit, and she wants to go back and make another season of Riverdale or some shit. She goes out, she leaves. Now you say, okay, replace her with somebody different. Like, you don't need to recast. You don't really have that problem. They can kind of come and go, and they can serve their time in the X-Men, and when they leave, it's all good. Part of me wants it to be, wouldn't mind if it was a period piece, but I think it would be kind of hard. Like, where were the X-Men for the last 10 years? Why did no one complain about it? Maybe we could have something where the original X-Men were kind of secretive, and then have a sequel where they're older, and like the first generation of X-Men or the surviving first generation are older, and they're teaching the new school. You have like Storm and Beast and all that, and maybe set the first movie in like the 90s. I know that's more or less what they've been doing with these recent movies, Days of Future Past, or not Days of Future Past so much, but Age of Apocalypse and all that shit. But you know, you could do something like that, and then eventually I would bet at the end of the trilogy maybe do Apocalypse again, because Apocalypse sucked in their continuity. Maybe the MCU could do it better. My big thing is stay the fuck away from Dark Phoenix. Maybe after fucking like 5 movies, go to Dark Phoenix. But I do not want to see another Dark Phoenix movie every fucking decade, because I know they're about to butcher the next Dark Phoenix movie. And I will review the new Dark Phoenix movie, and I am pretty much calling it now. It's gonna suck as bad as Age of Apocalypse. It's actually directed by the guy who wrote X3, who had no fundamental understanding of the Dark Phoenix saga, so now he's directing the Dark Phoenix movie. I am very glad Fox no longer has their hands on these characters. That this is the segue to my end. This was a ramble because I had no script, but the point of this video was I'm overall happy. It also probably caused us to get less superhero movies every year, which I think is a positive, because I am kind of tired of superhero movies. If I can get one X-Men movie a year rather than 5, that would be great. So, there you go.